Does distant starlight prove the universe is old?
One of the most common questions that I get asked when people find out that I'm a creation astronomer is, what about distant starlight? How did God get the light from those distant galaxies to Earth in thousands of years that the Bible says for the age of the universe? Well, there are actually several different ways to get light to travel those enormous regions in a relatively short amount of time. One way is what's called an anisotropic synchrony convention. And that's a little bit like time zones on the Earth. You know, I can leave Kentucky at around 4 o'clock in an airplane and arrive in Colorado at 4 o'clock without going infinitely fast or anything like that. And the reason is because the way time is defined on Earth, we use a local time convention as we travel across the world. As long as I'm going west, that'll work. Well, a similar thing can be done in space, and in fact has been done since ancient times. And so perhaps God is using that anisotropic time zone model of zones out in space there. And so light can travel those enormous regions in no time at all. Light can be created with the star on day 4, and it can arrive on Earth on day 4, you see, so it's not really an issue.
All right, let's just pause it right there. This is the first point I want to make. With regard to getting light to travel incredible distances, he says that it acts like time zones on Earth. He says, a similar thing can be done in space, and in fact has been done since ancient times. And then he just goes on to say that it works like that. Like, he doesn't even give an example. He says that light can just do that. Light can work as if it's going through time zones. And then he says God could have made stars on day 4, and the light could have hit Earth on day 4 still. So basically it sounds like he's making a day longer than 24 hours to accommodate distant starlight. This basically sounds like the day-age theory that old Earth creationists use to accommodate this distant starlight thing. It's basically, okay, light is traveling from millions of light years away to get here, and God said that he made the stars on day 4, but the light got here on day 4, so maybe day 4 isn't a real 24-hour period, maybe it's millions of light years, and so on day 4 those really distant stars put out their light waves and the waves got to Earth all on day 4. That's basically what it sounds like he's saying here.
But there are other creationists that have proposed that God used perhaps time dilation, gravitational time dilation, for example. Einstein tells us that time can flow at different rates in different environments. That's something that we've demonstrated with atomic clocks. We know it's true. So perhaps time flows more slowly on Earth than it does in the distant region of the universe because the Earth is in a gravitational well. That is, it's near the center of a finite amount of galaxies, and therefore time would flow more slowly on Earth than it does out in the distant regions of space. And so light can trickle in at its own slow rate, but on Earth only thousands of years elapses. That's an interesting possibility.
Okay, let's stop there again. This whole thing about time flowing at different rates in different parts of the universe, do you remember swallowing that one? It never made sense to me. I can't believe people actually believe this, that time on Earth flows a certain speed, a certain rate, but somewhere else in the universe it goes different. You know, it just works differently. Do you remember learning when you were a kid, astronauts go out into space, and when they come back, it turns out they've aged differently because time flows differently in space than it does on Earth. That doesn't make any sense. And I remember an argument that I had with a friend who told me time can be doing something different in one part of space compared to another, but I stand by what I said. Say, for example, the moment Jesus comes back to the Earth physically, that moment, that's a big moment. That would be the same moment across the entire universe, if there were a universe to begin with. But say that this universe is millions of light years wide. When Jesus comes back to Earth, are you going to try and say that in some other place in the universe that Jesus hasn't come back to Earth yet because time works differently? That doesn't make any sense. You know, if you imagine the universe as this bubble, and if you could zoom out and look at the universe as God supposedly would, if one thing were to happen on one end of the universe, it happened at the same point in time across the whole universe. A small scale example would be to pick the room that you're sitting in right now. If a jar fell off the counter across the room and it hit the ground and broke, it hit the ground and broke at a certain point in time. At a certain point, at a fixed point in God's history, that jar fell off the counter and broke. And are you seriously going to believe that if you're across the room, that the jar fell and broke at a different time? If one thing happens in one area at a certain point in time, it happened across the entire creation field at the same point in time. And then he goes on to say that Earth is in a gravitational well. Don't even get me started on gravity. Let's keep going.
One answer that we would not recommend using is that God simply created the beams of light already on their way. And the reason we don't think that that's a good answer is because we see things happen in space. We see stars explode, for example. And if God just created the beam en route, then that means that the star that we saw explode never really happened. God just painted a picture of that explosion along this light beam, when in fact the star never exploded, never even existed. And so I don't think that God is going to create pictures of fictional events out in space there. And if He did out in space, why not here on Earth? We really couldn't trust our senses if God created light beams that don't really come from their source. So I don't think that's the best explanation.
Okay, did you catch that? He said he doesn't think God is going to paint pictures of fictional events out in space. And he continues on, we wouldn't be able to trust our senses. Do you see the irony here? This guy's telling you that there are stars billions of light years in space. This is a Christian man, supposedly. And I'm not trying to demonize him. I'm saying this guy says he's a Christian. He believes in young Earth creation, like I think we all should. But he goes on to say that, there's stars billions of light years away. But he doesn't think that God is going to paint a fictitious picture of an event out in space. We wouldn't be able to trust our senses. Come on, man. I can't even handle it.
Well, light is quite a bit faster than your car. Light can go 670 million miles per hour, quite a bit faster. And of course, those are sort of arbitrary units, miles and hour, and 670 is not a really good number. So astronomers like to say it this way. We like to say that light travels 1 light year in 1 year. So a light year is a distance. It's about 6 trillion miles or 10 trillion kilometers. So it's a distance, and light can travel that distance in 1 year. That, mathematically, is the distant starlight problem, you see. Because we do see galaxies that are many billions of light years away, and therefore you would think the time it would take for light to traverse that distance would also be billions of years. That's the distant starlight problem. And the first thing that people try to do, I find, is they question the distance. And this is a solution I would not recommend. The claim is that maybe those distances aren't real. Maybe the galaxies really are not many billions of light years away. And I would say that that has a big problem with it, and the big problem with it is that good operational science does confirm that those galaxies are indeed at great distance. You see, a lot of times creationists will look at some of the evidences in astronomy, and they realize that a lot of those evidences are tainted by evolutionary thinking, and that's correct. But I would say that distance is not one that's been tainted by evolutionary thinking. Those distances are established by good operational science. There's no evolutionary content in them, not at all. Galaxies are really very, very far away indeed. And we might be wrong about the distances by a factor of 2 or so, but I don't think we're off by a factor of 1,000,000. And that's what you'd have to be in order for distance alone to solve the distant starlight problem.
All right, so did you see what he did there? He said, the first problem that he has is when people question the distance in the first place. He'll tell you, and astronomy, modern astronomy will tell you that these stars that we see are millions of light years away. But to question that distance is bad because, well, it's been proven, good operational science, according to Dr. Jason Lizzle, has proven that these galaxies are, in fact, millions of light years away. But then he goes on to say that, creation scientists will agree much of astronomy is tainted by the theory of evolution. A lot of what you will learn in university about astronomy and about the stars, about the universe, it's all messed up. It's all twisted because of the theory of evolution. But then he says, the distance part, however, that's not tainted by evolution.
Distances are established by good operational science. There's no evolutionary content in them, not at all.
Did you notice the way he said that? I'm not so sure I trust this Jason Lizzle guy anymore. Oh no, there's no evolutionary content in there. No, not even a little bit. No, not at all, he says.
The biggest thing we need to explain is how starlight got here fast within the thousands of years that the Bible gives us and that the rest of the evidence gives us. In contrast to what you might think, clocks and time itself doesn't tick at the same rate at every different part of the universe. Imagine some big hands on our trampoline applying tension to the edges. So I want you to be able to trust the Bible to be true.
Wow, did you catch that? I want you to be able to trust the Bible. This guy is unbelievable. Oh my gosh, is it any wonder evolutionists used to make fun of creationists, or still do, when they try to explain distant starlight? You cannot explain distant starlight if you want to believe in a young Earth. They are not compatible. Let me say that again. The young Earth, the 6,000-year-old Earth, approximately, is not compatible with distant starlight. This is why evolutionists think creationists are stupid, because you can't have a 6,000-year-old Earth and millions of light years away there's these stars that have somehow, their light has reached us in less than 6,000 years. They're more than 1,000,000 light years away. It's not congruent. They don't work. So that being said, how do we deal with this problem? Let's take a look at the Bible for once, and let's see what God himself had to say about creation and the distant starlight problem. Check it out. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Take a look at those two words, heaven and earth. Keep an eye on those. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and he divided the waters which were under it from the waters which were above it, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. Isn't that interesting? The firmament is called heaven. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. And he made the stars also. And he set them, God set them, he put them, he placed them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. Check out Isaiah 40:22. It is he that stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. Now look at Job 37:18. Hast thou with him spread out the sky, which is strong and as a molten looking glass? And last but not least, let's see Psalm 148:4. Praise him, ye heavens of heavens, and ye waters that be above the heavens. Remember, heaven was defined as the firmament. The firmament was called heaven. So don't these passages alone give you as a Christian enough reason to believe that, well, all this flat earth stuff all over YouTube is, contradicting mainstream science? It's agreeing with the Bible. The Bible all along has said that stars are right up there in the firmament. That's where God placed them. The sun and the moon and everything is in the firmament, which is backed up by things that we see, like the ripples going across the moon or the projected sun that people recorded during the recent eclipse. All this time, young Earth creationists have been trying to puzzle out this distant starlight thing, and if you go back and see what they have to say, it's nonsense. It's crazy. They come up with the craziest, weirdest pseudoscientific theories to try and explain distant starlight, when all along the Bible has consistently told us in the Genesis account of creation that God made the world and put a dome over it and put the stars inside of this dome called the firmament. So there you go. I just wanted to make a video that tackled the distant starlight problem with young Earth creationism. And yeah, like I said, and I'll just say it again, distant starlight is not congruent with young Earth cosmology. If you want to believe in young Earth, you have to believe in young starlight as well. And according to the Bible, those stars have been shining for the exact same amount of time that the Earth has been around, give or take a few days. All right, see you next time.